AEW Dynamite has been a mainstay in professional wrestling television ever since its premiere back in 2019. From shocking debuts, insane returns, and all the wonderful and wacky moments that it has delivered, it's true to say that AEW Dynamite changed wrestling forever. And as it stands on the precipice of surpassing WCW Nitro as the longest running wrestling show on Turner Networks, it's time to look back at how AEW Dynamite came to be and how exactly Dynamite transformed the wrestling that we know today. I'm Umar Q for Wrestle Vibes. Be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. This is the birth of AEW Dynamite. Before we look at how Dynamite came together, it's important to understand the context of the environment that Dynamite came into. After several years of competing with the then WWF, WCW closed its store in 2001, and with it, it also allowed WWE to essentially monopolize professional wrestling. Gone were the days where Vince McMahon was driven to be better. Gone were the days where the creative was motivated by what was on the other channel and where WWF and later WWE were chasing that rating. Instead, WWE would become the only game in town. They were the big dog. They were the monopoly on professional wrestling, and with the only other alternatives being Ring of Honor and TNA, companies who could not give talent the level of pay or opportunity that they would receive in WWE, it seemed like that monopoly would never end. Yet, in 2019, it did. In the mid-2010s, a seismic shift began in the wrestling world. Not in boardrooms or creative meetings, but on YouTube. A group of wrestlers, Kenny Omega, Matt, Nick Jackson, and eventually the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes, were rewriting the rules of how you build a wrestling fan base. They weren't just elite in the ring, they were literally the elite. A spin-off from the globally popular Bullet Club faction in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but more than that, they were also driven by their desire to make wrestling better. They would go on to create Being the Elite, a quirky, inside joke-filled YouTube series that started as a travel vlog, but eventually evolved into a storytelling engine for not only them, but later AEW. They would host other wrestlers, have them on the show, do character workshops, and made viral moments seemingly weekly. It gave fans a rare glimpse into the personalities behind the personas and blurred the lines between the performer and the person themselves. Suddenly, fans weren't just following wrestling matches, they were also following the lives of the elite. This would endear them in a way that we hadn't seen up until that point to the group and allowed them to have a real core fan base that would follow them wherever they went. In May 2017, wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer tweeted that no non-WWE promotion would be able to sell 10,000 tickets to an American wrestling show. Cody Rhodes and the Bucks took that personally, and what would follow would be one of the most audacious independent wrestling ventures in modern history, the first ever All In. Funded and promoted without a major company, All In was held on September 1st, 2018 in the Sears Center Arena. Against all odds, it sold out in under 30 minutes. The card featured a dream lineup of talent, including Kenny Omega versus Pentagon Jr., the Young Bucks and Kota Ibushi versus Rey Mysterio, and others, and Cody Rhodes finally capturing the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship in one of the most emotional story finishes we have ever seen. On top of that, it was a pay-per-view success, garnering 50,000 buys with an attendance of over 11,000. All In wasn't just a great show, it served as a legitimate proof of concept of what an alternative to the monopoly of WWE could be. That wrestlers could have a place where they could bet on themselves and win. And as it happens, watching All In from a distance was Tony Khan, a sports executive, self-proclaimed data nerd, and lifelong wrestling fan. Khan, whose family owns the Jacksonville Jaguars and Fulham FC, had dreamed of launching a wrestling promotion that respected the intelligence of fans and prioritized in-ring action along with storytelling. When he saw what the Elite pulled off at All In, he knew it was the right time. He reached out to them with a proposition. Let's build something real, something permanent. With the Elite as the founding members and Khan as the president and CEO, All Elite Wrestling was officially born on January 1st, 2019. And from day one, it was clear. This wasn't just another startup. This was a movement to change professional wrestling for the better. And it had the vision, it had the momentum, and unlike other companies of its time, it had the legitimate financial backing. Just days after the announcement of AEW, the company held its first ever rally in Jacksonville with Cody, the Bucks, Brandy Rhodes, and Kenny Omega all in attendance to lay the foundation for their mission. A sports-based presentation, equal pay for women, and more creative freedom. Then came the roster reveals with the likes of Hangman Adam Page and the Bastard Pac, and most importantly, WWE legend Chris Jericho. And with that, the buzz just kept on building. AEW wasn't just reuniting the Elite, it was assembling a dream team of indie legends, international stars, and WWE household names. It was a breath of fresh air for fans who had long felt stuck between loyalty to talent and frustrations with the WWE system. AEW was positioning itself not just as an alternative to WWE, but as a correction to the system. A wrestling-first company built by and for wrestlers. AEW's first ever event, Double or Nothing, would go on to take place on May 25th, 2019 at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, where they had 10,000 in attendance. And it was more than just a debut for the company, it was a declaration. Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes tore the house down in an emotional, bloody tribute to brotherhood and their father's legacy. The Young Bucks clashed with the Lucha Brothers in a tag team clinic. And in the main event, Chris Jericho defeated Kenny Omega to win a shot to be the first ever AEW World Champion, only to be interrupted with the shocking debut of Jon Moxley, formerly known in WWE as Dean Ambrose. The crowd erupted as the show ended, and it was evident that AEW had not only delivered a product, it had arrived. But the only question that remained was, would AEW actually end up on TV? One thing we need to remember about the state of wrestling back in the 2010s was that the only real competition that WWE had as far as wrestling being on television was TNA, and AEW arrived at a time where TNA was at the worst point it had ever been. After losing its deal with Spike TV back in 2014, the company was floundering on stations like Pop TV and Destination America, and it seemed like the appetite for professional wrestling just wasn't there in TV executive rooms. However, the truth is that on May 15th of 2019, AEW actually had announced that it had secured a weekly 2-hour live show on TNT, the same network that once broadcast WCW Nitro. The show would air on Wednesday nights, creating a new battleground for wrestling fans. It was a full circle moment. Pro wrestling was returning to a major cable network for the first time in 2 decades. They called it AEW Dynamite, a name that reflected the company's explosive, fast-paced style and disruptive attitude. It wasn't just another wrestling show, it was a statement that the war for Wednesday nights was about to begin. And on October 2nd, 2019, AEW Dynamite aired its first ever live episode in a sold-out Capital One Arena in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. Over 14,000 fans packed the arena, with over 1.4 million TVs tuned in at home. The atmosphere was electric. Arguably the heart and soul of the company at that point, Cody Rhodes opened the night wrestling a young star in Sammy Guevara, delivering a statement match that blended old school storytelling with a modern flair. Chris Jericho, by then the AEW World Champion, formed the Inner Circle, an imposing new faction which included the likes of Sammy Guevara, Pride and Powerful, and a debuting Jake Hager, closing the show with a beatdown of the Elite, while Jon Moxley had his eyes set on Kenny Omega and beat him senseless throughout the Capital One Arena. With that first ever episode, Dynamite made a statement. Dynamite was fast, it was loud, it was fun, and it changed the game. It would force WWE to be better. It would force WWE to rethink their own strategy. And while Dynamite never necessarily beat WWE's main shows in the ratings, it did what it needed to do. It disrupted professional wrestling. It provided an alternative for wrestling fans who felt like WWE wasn't catering to them. And it also forced WWE's hands to be better in certain moments. It wasn't always perfect, but it was passionate, fresh, and sincere. AEW wasn't trying to be WWE, it was trying to be itself. And in doing so, it gave wrestlers and the fans something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that wrestling could be more than just content, that it could be art, storytelling, athleticism, and yes, rebellion. From a YouTube vlog to packed arenas on prime-time cable TV, the rise of AEW Dynamite is the story of wrestlers betting on themselves, fans rallying behind a cause, and an industry that needed change and finally got it. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know what your favorite Dynamite moment of all time is. Also, be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and check out one of these other videos from WrestleVibes.